Sustainability, where consumers and corporates compromise. What does it mean to you when your favorite personal care product, food, or household item is relaunched sustainably? Would you like it more? Do you think it will work just as well? Do you end up paying more for it? For many everyday items, the packaging or product material often gets substituted for renewable sources that are redesignated as recyclable or compostable. Some of them work well, others not so much. I was recently reading about the recycling sham, where only 9% of plastic that has ever been created has been recycled in the world, and started learning about the current system in place for a sustainable future, and I became indignant. China has now shut its borders to plastic, and the rest of Asia is following suit, and we have nowhere to put our plastic. So, instead of 91% of plastic going to landfills, oceans, and incinerators, now almost 100% will be. Even that glimmer of hope of energy from waste incinerators has been dashed, as we now know it is more carbon intensive, second only to coal. So, why was the blame being pushed onto us as the consumers? Why is it so difficult to live sustainably? I found myself asking these questions during my process for founding a sustainable personal hygiene company. I want to let you in on what my entrepreneurial journey taught me on sustainability and compromise. When I was in my final year of medical school, I was having a very bad period. I asked my housemate to buy me some sanitary products and had a good chuckle when he brought home about half of the store. We got talking about periods and had a rather enlightening discussion. He had never considered the practicalities of periods, and I had never had to justify them. I'd never really fully thought about the environmental impact of my period, nor many activities in my daily life. I had rather lazily been reflexively purchasing what I thought were sustainable products that were labelled organic, bioplastic, and compostable. I was coming across these green terms commonly in my daily life, and I don't fully understand them. What does sustainable leather mean? How can mass leather production be sustainable with cows' contributions to climate change? How can mass vegan leather production be also sustainable without impacting agriculture and food? Ambiguous terms such as eco-friendly are not specific. What does that mean? Is that referring to the carbon footprint? There are different meanings of zero waste. So are we talking about an individual product level or on a mass corporate scale where we look at all aspects of the company and product impact from cradle to grave? Myself and my housemate Aaron entered Imperial's innovation competition. As it was rather fittingly the spark to the discussion, we entered with a fully biodegradable sanitary pad. We substituted conventional materials with biodegradable ones and, combined with a savvy period app, sprinkled in with some machine learning, and entered with this idea. We were fortunate and won, and decided to use the money on experimenting with the prototype and testing out our hypothesis. We started off with understanding why our biodegradable pad was better than a conventional plastic one, and why we should convince people to buy them. During this, we found that people would prefer sustainability up to a certain point, as long as it did not impact their priorities such as comfort or quality of the product, or lifestyle changes needed for a reusable one. We learned that in general, people would prioritize the intrinsic factors of a product over the extrinsic factors for sustainability. Whilst understanding what drove purchasing decisions, we were also testing our hypothesis that biodegradable pads are more sustainable than conventional plastic ones. Our first failure was that we didn't have a working definition of sustainability. This is a key internal process that we realized we needed. How can you strive for something if you don't have a clear criteria or definition for success? We define product sustainability as a product that has a positive or no long-term ecological impact from production to disposal. Well then, our hypothesis was wrong, as pads are either flushed, incinerated, or end up in landfill, none of our biodegradable pads would ever find a way to degrade. We panicked. What do we do with the money now? So we had to change our solution once we better understood the problem. We realized that our initial proposal did nothing to the actual impact of the pad on the environment. The real problem lay around the point of disposal and not the materials. So we decided to create a flushable pad. A pad that uses existing infrastructure to break down into starch and sugar when put into contact with water. Before, it seemed insane to me that every day in the UK, over 2.5 million pads and 4.5 million tampons are flushed down the toilets. That's a third of all pads and tampons being flushed away. But then when you think about it, it doesn't seem all that insane. You are sitting on a toilet, you flush toilet paper after use. If you thought along the same principles, it seems to follow that you should flush a pad. We are surrounded by products that are sold as sustainable and better for the environment. But we realize that companies have only ever thought about the impact of the environment during the making of their products, leaving the burden of disposal to the consumer. Many public awareness campaigns focus solely on the actions of the consumer and not companies. Companies should be thinking through the entire product life cycle, so products are easy to use and disuse sustainably in scale for mass consumption. As the R&D for our flushable pad took 3 years, during that time we realized a huge problem to tackle is the misinformation and perception surrounding sustainability. We are exposed to sustainable language on a daily basis. Most of these words mean next to nothing in current objective sustainable standards, and the words that do provide definition within context are often misused in branding. We see this as a marketing push to relabel the product or rebrand with greenwashing without real innovation or change to back it up. So this begs an important question. How can we expect to grow sustainable businesses and collectively decide on actions without even being able to talk about it properly? With the spotlight on growing environmental, social, and governance funds to drive innovation in these sectors has prompted changes within consumables and our purchasing patterns. Slowly, we are defining some of these words such as biodegradable, compostable, and biodynamic into universal scientific standards, but we still have a long way to go. We see a lot of companies with misleading use of these words. As we set standards for them, we'll be able to culture sustainable businesses and educate consumers too. So by clarifying the language of sustainability, we can then talk honestly about the true impact of products from companies that have made the switch. Our focus group stated that they often felt that the quality of the products, however, were compromised in sustainable options, or their lifestyle was compromised with the switch to reusable, and voiced that their sustainable options were usually more expensive. This compromise felt by the consumer, whether on performance, finance, or lifestyle, was mirrored by many other consumer packaged goods. This compromise doesn't have to mean that you aren't happy with making the change, but ultimately, more of one thing may mean less of another. And these views are mirrored for many consumer packaged goods, forcing consumers to some kind of compromise. But is this compromise inevitable? This consumer demand for better has driven awareness and innovation, and we are seeing sustainable innovation across industries as they're asking questions like, who is the last person to be holding the product at disposal? What disposal methods will be commonly available to them? And importantly, what incentivizes the customer to correctly dispose of a product? We are seeing a shift in responsibility as companies design consumer-centric sustainability. These companies are innovating products to ensure that the entire product lifecycle is sustainable and not compromising the quality of their products nor the environmental impact. We are seeing climate-positive companies who give back more than they use, and climate-conscious funds driving changes in fields across sectors. But let's take a step back and compare how the market values different types of harm. We would never launch a product to the market that knowingly caused damage to consumers. There are just unacceptable side effects. However, extrinsic damage to the environment is not considered unacceptable. The consumers are now advocating for this damage to the environment to be as unacceptable as the intrinsic damage to us, to stop harmful processes and materials going into the products and into the environment. So through asking a series of important questions throughout my journey, I was able to learn what actions we can do on our part as the consumer to understand and promote sustainability, and where we are still forced to compromise. I urge you to consider these 3 questions on your next purchase. What does that really mean? By first understanding the language, we recognize that many companies greenwash their products. So ask yourself what actually is clean, natural, plastic-free, and base your decision on that and not the marketing or branding behind it. The second question is, where does it come from and where does it go? Pay attention to the complete life cycle of your products. Not only should your products be sustainably produced and used, but also disused. Companies must take back the responsibility of product disposal. And this final question is, do I really need this? This recognizes that we as consumers are the most important factors. We purchase the product. I personally find this one the hardest and wrestle with this daily. I live a modern life and could choose to be a hermit and reuse everything. However, there is a certain level of convenience and hygiene that I get from disposable products that I am sometimes unwilling to give up. This should be a balance that is personal to your lifestyle, and you make the decision. Like I said, you are the most important. Every product has an impact, no matter how sustainable. Sometimes the consumer does not want to compromise on convenience. Other times the corporation does not want to compromise on margins. We need to recognize that sustainability is a spectrum and consumption always has a price. Thank you very much.